Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. I'm back to work here on this Rockwell Delta tool grinder, and I'm ready to try to get this thing back together. I've cleaned up most of the components, finished brazing on this piece of steel. It ain't great, but you know, since I'm not going through a full restoration on this thing, this is going to be just fine. So right now I just want to kind of get this thing back together, and continuing on with my little experiment with using a microphone. I have got a new microphone this week, so hopefully it sounds a little bit better than the one from last week. We'll see how it goes. I figure I started this project directly speaking to the camera. I might as well finish it. Don't know if it's going to continue after this one, but we'll give it a try. Anyway, next thing I need to do, I need to rebolt this down to the base. But before I do that, I want to get this electrical tape off of here, because it kind of feels like there's nuts and bolts in here, which means I'm going to have to recrimp some ring terminals onto the end of the incoming power. I'm leaving this as it is as well. Cleaned it up a little bit. It's cleaner, but it's definitely not clean. All right, let me get a screwdriver and a pair of pliers. We'll get these apart. I'm just going to take off the cut wire. I'm going to put this nut back on the screw so I don't have to try to read all of the markings on the wires, figure out which one goes to which. It doesn't really matter which color goes to which terminal here, because this three-phase motor, it will turn a direction, and to reverse the direction of a three-phase motor, the only thing I'll need to do is swap two of these leads. So it doesn't really matter which one gets, the black, the white, or the red. And technically those aren't even the right colors for three-phase. One of these wires, I think the white one's technically supposed to be blue, but it's often difficult to find cable with the correct wiring color, so we just use standard SO cable. All right. Okay, let me get this now mounted back into the base. All right, so this originally had this power switch, was originally attached to the back of this, and I had to remove this in order to make this thing fit in my garage. But now I can put it back. So I think what I want to do is feed this through this connector, or this hole on the back of the base, and then I will mount this to the base where the original mounting holes were. I don't know what happened to the screws for that, but Those are long gone. I think I've had this for almost a year now. I must admit I am a little bit annoyed with myself with this, because when I originally took this thing apart, I fully planned to replace all the wiring, because generally whenever I take apart one of these machines, I find that the wiring in it, at least the supply power and stuff, is usually in fairly rough shape, brittle insulation, that kind of stuff. But once I got this apart, I saw it was actually not bad at all. So I opted to keep it. And had I would have done that little bit of extra due diligence before I took it apart, or should I say before I cut those wires, I wouldn't have to do what I'm doing now, which is to put all new crimp connectors on this. But then again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. At least I know that the connectors are in good shape. So I'll get this rewired, get new ends crimped on here, and I'll leave the bottom open for now until I get it ready to run, because I do want to make sure that the motor's running in the right direction, and I have a thing about keeping the wire colors the same on the plug that plugs into the outlet, and I don't want to have to open up the control box to change wires around if I find that the motor is running in a direction that I don't want it to run for when it's supposed to be running forward. So let me get these crimped on here, and I'll bring you back once I get this taped up. All right, there we go. So I got new terminals crimped on there, got them secured down. If I have to switch these, it's not that big of a deal to take a couple of these off. All right, let's get this flipped around and start putting the motor back together. Well, before I can get this motor back together, I do need to put new bearings on this thing. I did buy a new set of bearings off of the Amazons. I do not know where these were made. I'm actually surprised there's no country of origin on these somewhere. Of course, I'd rather have USA based stuff, but that is not always possible, as we often find out. All right, so I need to get this bearing off of here. This one over here came off actually pretty easy when I took the arbor out. A couple of Woodruff keys, a spacer. This side has another Woodruff key. All right, and then there's this spacer. I'll have to get those cleaned up on the wire wheel. And it looks like that's going to come off fairly easily, which I'm surprised. Well, maybe I will put this in the arbor press real quick and get that off of there. Just to make things, maybe make my life a little bit easier, I'll just press this off real quick. This will take almost no effort whatsoever, I am sure, but there we go. What I think I want to do, I'm going to take this over to the lathe and chuck it up in the lathe and just take some Scotch-Brite and clean this up a little bit. All right, I'll get this chucked up in the lathe here in the 6-jaw. Move this out of the way. I'm just really interested in cleaning up. This doesn't matter. It's right here where this bearing is going to ride, and also where the end plates ride. So we'll get a little piece of Scotch-Brite. While I'm here, I might as well go ahead and clean these up too. Yeah, it looks a little nicer. We'll do the same thing on the other side. I will note I am chucking this up on an area where the bearings do not ride. Well, if nothing, it should make it a lot easier for those bearings to go back on. Okay, with those cleaned up, I think I'm good to put the bearings back on. I do need to clean up these spacers. Actually, we're going to do that real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, it's a little nicer. I did not put these in the ultrasonic because they were left on the arbor. So let me get these bearings out. See if I'm going to get lucky. Whether or not I'm going to need to press these on. I hope not. But the other question is, should I put these in the end bell first and then the arbor? All right. Okay, that one went on nice and easy, so that's cool. Let me see if I can't. It's gonna fit. Yeah, that'll fit on the race. Let me see if a little bit of. There we go. I did not want to have to try to press those on because it won't fit my arbor press, and my hydraulic press is a mess. So, there we go. Now, this will go into the stator, and it only goes in one way. I don't know if you can see this. See this on the camera, but the windings come out a little further on this side than they do on this side, and the rotor is offset, so I can't put it in that way. It's got to go in this way. So this is going to go in here, be right about there. And what I think I can do, I can get one of these end bells on. This is the one that goes over here. And I know there was a wavy washer in one side of this. I do have this parts diagram that a friend of the channel, viewer, sent me, but it doesn't really show where the wavy washer might have been. Because part number 10 is a steel washer, but that's the spacer. But it doesn't really show. The motor exploded. So I'm going to need to go back and look at the video of taking this apart so I can figure out which side this went on. Okay, so going back and looking at the disassembly video, the raw video, the wavy washer was on this side of the motor, so we'll put that back into there. Okay, so this is going to go down. There was no wavy washer or anything on this side. All right, this is probably going to be a lot trickier than it might look. Of course, those bearings are going to fight me. All right. Let's take that off of there. Let's take all those out. How easily does this bearing fit into this side? All right, so the bearing fits a lot easier on this side than this side. So I think what I want to do is I'm going to tap this bearing in over here. Again, this side does not have a wavy washer. But this side's a lot tighter than the other side. Can't tell if it's all the way in or not. Go a little bit more. It actually sounds good. All right. So now we'll take the longer end of the arbor and we'll get that through. We'll tappy tap tap. There we go. Okay, let's get this in here. I set a couple of marks here on the back here, so I had a decent idea of how this side was supposed to end up. So turn this back around this way. Get our wavy washer in here. Oh yeah, that goes together. A lot easier that way. Okay. Now let's get these connecting rods together and attach. All right, that went in pretty smoothly. Get one of these nuts started on it. I'm doing this blind. There we go. All right, at least now I know it's not going to fall apart on me. Get this last nut started, and then we'll tighten this up. And hopefully, hopefully this will actually turn, and I haven't done anything to screw it up. All right, well, it turns, and it sounds great, which means it doesn't make any noise at all. All right, so with that in place, I'm not going to put these spacers back on. There's no point in that just yet. What I do want to do is go ahead and reintroduce the power line and plug it in just to see which direction this motor is turning, because when I put this switch here in the forward position, I want the motor to turn this way, because I'm right-handed. I'm more likely to use the right-hand side of this. I want it coming down toward me for most grinding operations anyway. And then, of course, this is reversible, so I can always use the back end another way. But before I can do that, I need to get the power reconnected, which means correcting yet another mistake, which is cutting these off when I should have just gone through the trouble of unscrewing them, and I wouldn't be going through this again. But like I said, that's okay. But I am going to keep the red, the black, and the white the way they are here. you know, because red, black, white. And then we'll check it. We'll see if I need to reverse the wires underneath. I'm going to also have to do a crimp here for that, for the ground. That's probably one of the most important connections here, because the last thing I want to do is end up shorting one of these legs to the case, in which that becomes an electrical hazard. I am no electrical engineer. I'm not professing to know what I'm doing. You do this at your own risk. This is my machine. I'll do it the way that I want to do it, and you do your machine the way you want to do it. So let me get the power cord rerouted and get a plug on the end of it, and I'll bring you back when I've got that ready. Well, after re-examining my re-examined power cord, I opted to replace it. After getting a little closer at the installation of the old one, it was cracked in a couple spots, or is showing some like alligator skin, and better safe than sorry. I've got a plug on the end of it. I got plugged into a 3-phase extension cord, and got the 3-phase converter running in the background there. I don't know if you can hear that, but let's see, get you in a position where you can see this arbor. All right, let's see. Put a little tape on this just so we can maybe get a better idea of which way it's turning. If I switch it to forward, and that is running this way, and I want it to run this way. If I go reverse, sounds really quiet. This is a nice motor. I'm impressed. All right, let me flip this on its back and switch a couple of those wires, and I'll bring you back when I've got that done. All right, I went ahead and swapped 2 of the wires in the base. Got the phase converter back on. I also put the cover plate on the bottom to protect those wires. So now when we switch this to the forward mode, we should see the wheel turning this way, or at least that tape. And that's what I want. This thing does sound really good. You might be wondering why I'm going through all this trouble to keep all these color codes the same. Yeah, maybe some of it's a little bit of OCD, but all of my machines in this shop are wired the same way, meaning on the plug, all the plugs, each one of the terminals is the same color wire. L1, L2, L3, I forget which one's red, black, and white, but they're the same. So every machine, the plugs are wired the same. They're wired the same for the same rotation, you know, proper rotation, or what I'm going to call proper rotation of the machine. All the outlets are wired exactly the same way, and the same thing that's coming out of the phase converter. And part of that is, if everything's the same, then there's never any question about how something's going to run. So if I plug this machine into any other outlet in the shop, it's going to run the correct rotation, because everything L1, L2, and L3 are the same across the board. And part of the other reason for that is L3 is the generated leg. L1 and L2 are the live 220 volt single phase legs. And whenever you're hooking up control circuitry, say for example a push button contactor, you never want to use the generated leg for that. That is not recommended by the phase converter manufacturer. You always want to use either L1 or L2, and so that way, no matter what outlet I'm plugging into, I know that L1 or L2 are the live 220 volt legs, and the L3 is the generated. So I'll never make a mistake of using L3 for control circuits. So yeah, it might be a little bit anal retentive to do it this way, but it works for me, and I'm going to continue doing it this way. Well, I got the motor now mounted back over on the pedestal just to make it a little bit easier for me to move it around, so I can continue putting this thing back together. I do need to go ahead and reinstall this spacer Not exactly sure the purpose of it. The next thing is going to be this seal. This seal that goes on here. And at first I didn't realize this, but a viewer pointed out this is in fact a labyrinth seal. And it makes sense because the other side of this end plate has a recess that this seal or this thing fits down inside of. So because of all of that, you can see that it's a labyrinth, right? It goes over it. It doesn't need any kind of physical seal like a rubber seal or anything, because the dust is not likely to get through that. And quite frankly, there wasn't a whole lot of dust on the inside of the grinder. It was really just all on the outside. So we'll get this seal remounted. I'll edit that out. Now I'll go ahead and put that Woodruff key in. There we go. Yeah, I think it needs a little bit of a bump. I'm going to need to tighten that up. I'm debating on whether I'm going to make a tool to do this. I don't know. I'm going to do the same thing the other side. I'll bring you back when I'm done with that. Actually, I can't do the other side on this thing yet because I've got to reinsert that brake. Because I've got to get this up and through here and then get this spring compressed. Get this spring compressed so it fits over top of this tang. I don't know how well you can see that on the camera, but it's got to go up this way. Alright, let me get a screwdriver. I really don't know how effective this brake would actually be, but how am I going to do this? Yeah, I need to push that up somehow. Let me try to find a tool that I can use for this. Well, I didn't find a tool really for this, but I found this piece of round bar. I happen to have this little spigot on it, and I think I can use this to compress that spring and hopefully at least get it started over that tab. Maybe. I'll have to meet somebody at the factory whose job it was to put this together so I can ask them what they did. Ah, look at that. Maybe that's how they did it. All right, now I can go ahead and get the Woodruff key on here, that labyrinth seal, and the end plate installed. Put on that bearing spacer first. I am going to put the Woodruff key on first this time, just so I have a little bit more room. Now that labyrinth seal. And I can install the end plate on this side. Line up the key. There we go. I'm thinking I've only got these two nuts to put on here. Making a tool I don't think is I don't think it's worth the effort. So I'm going to try to wedge this wheel, and then I'll use a brass punch. That way at least I'm not damaging the nut. Turn this around, do the same thing to this side. That should be good. So the grinding wheels that fit on the end, they get mounted through 4 bolts, but in order to center them, you need something in here. And this came with a couple of these centering, I don't know what you want to call them, centering rings. Now these are 1 1/4 inch in diameter to fit inside of the ID of the wheel. Well, there was only one on this grinder when I got it, so I need to make another one of these. All right, I'm over here at the south bend. I've got a piece of 1045 chucked up in the lathe, and we'll go ahead and machine this to size. This is a bit oversized for what I need, but we'll get this machine down to size, and then we'll bore the hole. So it's 1 1/4 inch OD and 1 inch on the ID. So we're at 1 inch, 475, 486, 486, and I need to go to 250. I'm only taking about 40 thousandths off of the diameter. I have issues with this lathe and trying to take too heavy of a cut with carbide on some of this hardened steel, especially some of these alloys like 1045. So here I'll take 50 thousandths. That's actually cutting pretty decent and getting a nice chip. Maybe we'll stick with that. Take a quick measurement here, see how close we are. We're at 332. So that's 82 thousandths to go. All right, that should have been 50 thousandths off of the diameter. Okay, we're at 250, 75, 86. All right, that was 15 thousandths off the diameter. Let's see where we're at. So I'm at 125. Really? I must be reading this wrong. 125, 250, 271. So I still have another 21 thousandths to go. Take this in 2 passes. So we'll take the first 10 and then we'll finish it after we take a measurement. So 12 thousandths to go, or thereabout. Yeah, about 11 thousandths. So we're going to take all 11. Two thousandths over. Yeah, about 1.5 thousandths over. But before we do anything, take one of the actual wheels that I'm going to be using here just to see how it fits. All right, that's going to fit over there just fine. I'm not going to change that. We're going to leave that alone. Break the edge here real quick, and then we'll start boring out the center. I like to peck at it, especially when I face it off and leave a little tit on there. If I peck at it, it has a better chance of finding the center. Not super critical here, but that should be good. I don't know how sharp this drill is. I guess we're about to find out. Alright, that's deep enough, I think. Yep. Well, that's a terrible finish in there, isn't it? I'm going to use a smaller boring bar, the smaller insert. That sounds terrible. Doesn't look terrible, but boy, does it ever sound terrible. I mean, I've even clearanced this one just to make sure. I mean, I'll try turning to a new tip. Let's see if that doesn't help. All right, so I turn that insert to a fresh edge. We'll see if that doesn't help. Maybe a little. About 15 thousandths to go. Okay, thousandths over. That I can live with. Parting off is such sweet sorrow. I have more issues parting off on this lathe, I think, than I do with anything else. Bring this over to catch the part. I mean, I could try power feeding this, but I seem to have worse luck power feeding it than I do if I do it by hand. This isn't a very thick piece, so I'm kind of hoping I'll get lucky. It's actually going better than usual. Hope I didn't jinx myself. Yeah. One thing about having belts is that when it does that, the belt just slips. Going a little bit slower this time. Something got out of kilter, or I was close to the end. I can see some wobble. Now, if you're seeing the wobble in the part, fortunately, this is not going to be critical. Yeah, that didn't go too bad. All right, we'll get this out of here and we'll deburr it and try it on the grinder. All right, now go ahead and get these back in. This is actually the copy that I just made. I probably could have chamfered that a little more. Okay. Alrighty, now this should fit right over there. It does. It's a little tight, but that's fine. That's the original. This is my copy. It's a little looser, but that's okay. It doesn't bother me. But I think that's going to have to do it for this week. I just kind of run out of time in the shop, and the weekend that I'm recording this is the Snowmageddon 2026 weekend. It's getting pretty cold, and we're getting near 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And even though I do have a heated shop, It's a mini split, so it doesn't work as well down to those temperatures, so it gets a little cold in here. But I should be able to wrap this up here shortly in the coming days. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. It does help the algorithm. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber. Subscriptions are free on YouTube. If you would like to contribute in other ways than that, there are links down into the description, and you can always choose to become a channel member. Those little donations, they add up, and it makes it possible for me to be able to come out here in the shop and do these projects and edit the videos and get them uploaded. So every little bit certainly goes a long way. And with that, that's going to do it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.